Last week, the passenger side window in my Honda S2000 stopped going up. The window was stuck down and there was no way to bring it up. I'll show you what I did to figure out the problem and how I fixed it. The first thing I did was to try playing around with the switches. Obviously, make sure that the main is on, and if you see red, the main switch is on. Neither the passenger side nor the driver side control for the passenger window was doing anything. The window was just stuck down. But when I would move the passenger side switch up, I would hear a clicking noise, like an electrical click of a relay or something like that, which indicated that electrically the switch was probably working. The one on the driver's side didn't make any clicking, and I deduced that it was probably stuck down. It was constantly pushing that switch down, which was overriding the passenger side. Taking the door panel off the S2000 is amazingly easy. There are only 3 screws you need to remove. First, you take the little covers off the rigid handle, and then you use a Phillips head to unscrew those 2 screws in there. Next, you use a Phillips head again to go underneath the door handle lever. There's a small Phillips head screw there. You take that out, you take the housing of the door handle out, and then you go about the business of just popping off the door panel. There's a little black tab in here. There's only one of these. You pull that out, you get something under it and pry it out. And then you run your finger underneath the lip of this plastic here, and you'll find that there are more of those little tabs. I don't know what to call them. They're the little things that push in and secure stuff in place. You just get your hand under and you just pull out that door and pop those out. Then you grab the whole thing, you grab the whole panel, you kind of wiggle it a little, lift it up and to the left. No, I'm sorry, I think it's actually left and then up, but those are the general directions, left and up. You jiggle it around that way until the whole thing comes off, and then you just go and disconnect any cables that are there. There are going to be two cable harness things that you disconnect. Once I got the door panel completely off, it was time to start looking at how the switches actually worked. And I noticed that underneath the switches there was a little box of sorts. So I started unscrewing things there. It's all Phillips head. I just started taking things apart underneath. And one thing I can tell you about working on this part of the car is there's nothing sketchy that's going to happen when you start unscrewing things. I don't know if you've worked on stuff where you open something up and there were springs in there, or like something goes pop and things change and you realize I'm never going to be able to get this back the way it was. That's not the case with this. Everything's nicely self-contained, and nothing sketchy is going to happen when you open it up. So when I got it open to the point where I could see the underside of the physical switches, I was really interested in the way they work, because I had expected to see some kind of little buttons, like little membrane buttons or something that the lever would be pressing against and clicking on and off. But what I actually found were these sliders, these little potentiometers, which you just slide back and forth, and they basically are controlling voltage. And so what it's doing is it actually has a lever that interfaces with this, and it just slides the slider back and forth as you move the window switch up and down. And I thought that was really cool, because it just seems like a much more sophisticated way to build this than having those terrible little membrane buttons, which always go bad. So that was cool. And there's also another one for the main on and off switch that works the same way. It's actually a little lever that slides a pot back and forth. So very, very cool. But that also ended up being the problem. Underneath the switch, there are these little rockers, these little arms that are plastic, and one of mine was snapped off. It was just physically snapped off near the base. So that was it. And when you find a problem like that, that's so obvious, then you realize, okay, good, I found it. Now it's a matter of fixing it. And in this case, I just used Krazy Glue, actually Loctite super glue, but same idea, CA glue. Put a very, very fine little bead of glue on there and used tweezers to lower that arm back in place and reattach it. And that was a really kind of a stressful part of this project, because you really get one shot at it, and you also have to think of these parts as being like $200 or $300 parts just because of how scarce they are now. And if you can even find them, that's what it will cost you to replace them. So every little silly thing on an S2000, like this little window assembly, is actually valuable now that the car is becoming rare. So it definitely pays to try to take things apart and figure it out, as opposed to, you know, finding a replacement part for most of this stuff. So after getting the door all put back together, it's time to test out the whole system, test everything about the windows, and make sure it works completely. So I'm going to start the car because I've been pretty hard on the battery with all this stuff I've been doing. And now driver's side window works, and it always worked. Now the moment of truth with the passenger window, and it works. So our little fix is working. Now just to go through and be thorough, I'll make sure the passenger control works, and it does. I'll also make sure that the lockout switch works, and that works. So just to complete the test, we will test the convertible top, which should force all the windows down. When the convertible top motor is running, it also pushes all the windows down. So it works that way. I'll raise the windows again and make sure it pushes them down on the way back, and it works. So nice fall day.